So it breaks down all the different forms and all of the fields, and in most cases it has a list of the different options. So you'll see there are a lot of drop-down menus throughout the database. So the data dictionary goes through and it gives just a quick list of the options for you to familiarize yourselves with, or if you're looking for something in particular, you can see what the options are. So what I usually recommend is that you have a copy of this handy if you're going to be entering any information into the database. This is the first place to go for questions. Otherwise, I am usually pretty good about getting back to emails if I'm at my desk, about taking phone calls as well. So I'm here to support your use of the database. So just a quick note on the process today. So the first bit of time is going to be spent going through what we use for our training version of the database and just getting a look at the forms and the fields and some of the options and how the information kind of flows through the database. And then the second part is we do have a case available, correct? A client case?
We're going to have to use a sample case.
Okay.
Because none of our clients have signed the confidentiality waiver.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. I guess.
Sorry, I can't turn it off, nor can I unscrew it. It's a, sorry.
Oh, that light. Yeah.
That's the worst placement for a light in this room, apparently.
And we chose it.
Yeah.
My mistake with the, it's going to be a de-identified.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So in many cases, when I've done the training, sites haven't even had an active case yet, so it's just been the walkthrough part. So really, with this many people, it is difficult to actually enter a case in because I like to have everybody's going to be using it, kind of get a feel for where to find the information in their case files and how to translate that into what gets entered into the database. So a test or a dummy case is fine. That's no problem. So I guess we'll jump right in then. If you're going to record, we can get started.
Already gone.
Oh, we're already going.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Remote?
Oh,
no.
you don't have it up to the house.
Oh, that- Okay.
So when you guys open the database, every time you open it, it's going to take you to this green form. You'll see as we go through, all the forms are color-coded, so each one has a unique color, so you can kind of distinguish between them at a glance and know when you've changed forms. Color printing is at a premium, and the state's pretty broke, so that's why the copies aren't in color. But you'll see as we go through, all the different forms have different color schemes. So when you're on the green form, you know that you're on the main form and that this is the starting point for entering a case. So this, I'm not sure if this will be how it works in a runtime environment. But when you're using full access, you'll notice that you have this yellow bar up here at the top that says security warning, blah, 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 this may hurt your computer. Nothing in here, no code in here will do anything to harm a computer. So the first thing you'll need to do is click on Enable Content. And that should remove that warning and let you go through and access all the programming and the buttons and the other functionality in here. So the main form here is the first form you'll see when you come into the database, and this is where we collect some basic demographic and client case information. So you'll see we have fields up here for docket number, how the client was referred into the program, and what their current offense is. So in this case, the admitting offense is the offense that they're currently on probation for. And if you guys have any questions while I'm going through, I like to keep this pretty informal, so feel free to shout it out and we'll see if we can get it answered. So these referral pathway and referral source, these are options for who is referring an individual into the adult redeploy program or the ACT court. We have the ability to trim this list a little bit and only show you the options you're going to use. And I can set that up when we are going through the actual ACT court database. But you'll see there are a bunch of different options in here. You know, if the defense is going to be making the referral, the prosecution, or if everything's going to be coming from a judge or a probation officer, we have all those options covered. Referral pathway is essentially to distinguish between a new sentence into the ACT court in this case, or if they're being referred from an existing probation caseload. I believe you guys are just direct from court, so we will hide the probation violation or the PTR options, and you won't even see those. You'll just have the class 1, 2 felons direct from court or class 3 and 4 felons direct from court. If you're only going to be accepting 3 and 4 felons, then we can get rid of the 1 and 2 and you'll just have the one option to use all the time. Admitting offense, we tried to keep this as general as possible, so you'll see that we just have broader categories in here: violent offense, property offense, cannabis, meth, controlled substance, and then some of the other offense types. We split this up. We try to go based on statute with this. So anything involving an offense against property, retail theft, anything like that would go in property. I think the rest are pretty well self-explanatory. Sex offenses, generally, some of the sites have different criteria for who's eligible for the program. I'm not sure that you guys will be taking any sex offenders, but we do see people with registry violations and things like that. Violent offenses are anything that involves the force or threat of force in an offense. Those are ineligible for adult redeploy, but occasionally we do see violent offenders get referred into the program and actually start. So this is for us to catch that when it happens, and then we'll get back to you at the site and say, is this really a violent offender? If it is, we'll work with you to find a way to get them out of the adult redeploy program without necessarily sending them to prison or somewhere else. And if there are any questions on what offense would fit into one of these categories, you can let me know and we can get it worked out. First name, last name, I think are pretty self-explanatory. SID here is the state ID number that's attached to fingerprints. So this is not the driver's license number or the Illinois identification card number. This is what we use to keep track or pull down criminal histories for individuals from the state police criminal history records information system. This number is actually pretty important if it's available in the case file. This allows us to match arrest records both before ARI involvement and after ARI involvement. So this will be how we track recidivism going forward. Date of birth, sex and race are both with drop-down menus. You'll see sex is pretty self-explanatory. Race, we tried to keep this as close to the census definitions as possible. You will see that we do have Hispanic as a race in this case. This is for consistency between some of the other data sets that we use at with Adult Redeploy and at the Criminal Justice Information Authority. Technically, the census considers Hispanic an ethnicity, but a lot of the data sets we use consider it a race. So if you have somebody who's would otherwise identify as white Hispanic or black Hispanic, in those cases, we'll leave that up to you, how you want to categorize an individual with that combination, or if you want to put them as African American, white, or Hispanic, we'll leave that up to you guys. Veteran status, that's something that a lot of counties are starting to get more interested in keeping track of, especially with some of the federal dollars that are made available for veteran services. Or in some cases, adult redeploy sites have veterans courts. This is just a simple yes/no indicator. You may or may not run into that. It's something that's nice to have if it's available. If not, you don't need to get into it. There are some fields in here that are similar to that where it's nice information to have if it's available for a client, but if it's not available, then it's not necessary, and I'll kind of point those out as we go through. The acceptance or decision date, this is going to be the date that clients start the adult redeploy program, or the ACT court in this case. As well with this green form, which I'll get into in a minute, we're also looking to capture information on clients who are referred to the ACT court but are not enrolled in the ACT court. And that helps us in a number of ways. It helps us keep track of the types of referrals that are going to each of the adult redeploy programs, the types of individuals that are not eligible, and then that helps us tailor some technical assistance. The example I like to use with that is if we see towards the end of the grant period that a site is having trouble reaching its enrollment numbers, we can look at who they're not enrolling and see if there's a way we can maybe widen criteria within the scope of the program or within the scope of the adult redeploy enabling legislation. Or we can say, you know what, you guys are really targeting only people in your target population. Maybe we can revise the number downward or work with you in another way. So in those cases where an individual is referred but not enrolled, this would be the date that that decision was made. So the client either says, you know what, I don't want to go into the ACT court, I want to take my chances in another court, or if you, as the ACT court team, says, you know what, we're not going to enroll this person, this would be the date that decision was made for those individuals. So the way we distinguish between those two types of people, the people who are accepted and enrolled into the program and the people who are otherwise denied, is with the acceptance code field. So you see this is a drop-down menu here, and there are just a few options. So if they're accepted, they're enrolled into the program, and they actually start, it would be this first code up here, accepted and enrolled. And that means that they're referred, they're accepted, and they're going to be receiving services. Accepted but declined, the second option, that's for individuals who are offered a spot in the court, but they declined for whatever reason. We've seen that happen a bit, so we decided to create the option for it. Rejected based on criteria, so this would be individuals who were referred to the ACT court, and for whatever reason they were found ineligible. So whether it's their current offense or something in their history, or they don't meet the treatment criteria for the program, whatever the reason is. And then rejected based on capacity. I've never seen that used. It's pretty rare that an adult redeploy program fills up and can't enroll anybody, but it could happen, so we have the option for it. And you'll see that the termination outcome defaults to active until a client is indicated as having terminated. So a note on functionality here. The only time that these buttons here at the bottom will be editable or clickable is if a person's enrolled in the program. So for people who are referred but not enrolled, we're not going to make you guys go through and enter all their case information because we don't need it, and you guys don't need to keep it because they're not in the program. So you'll see if this acceptance code is anything other than enrolled, you'll see everything grays out at the bottom. You can't click it, you can't go further. That's because we don't need information on those people. So when you get to the point where you're having clients who have finished the program either successfully or unsuccessfully, we have the termination outcome here, and you'll see that there are a bunch of different options. Successful graduated, that means they completed all criteria. You guys, as probation, would terminate them successfully, or whatever the completion criteria are for the ACT court. Each site is different, so I can't really tell you what to consider successful. That's going to be up to you guys. I can provide insight if you have any cases that you're not sure about, or if you haven't quite worked out your successful completion criteria yet. But that's something that you guys will figure out as the program goes along if you haven't already. Unsuccessful, anything you guys would consider an unsuccessful termination. Declined after intake and dropped out are essentially the same thing. So dropped out would be if they continued along in the program for a while and then they fell out of the program or otherwise dropped out. As I said, active is the default. Deceased is pretty self-explanatory, and it does happen occasionally throughout the adult redeploy programs. And then transferred to another county. So this is not transferred within Cook County to another probation caseload or another court call. This is transferred to another jurisdiction. So if you have a person who resides in DuPage County or Kane County and they say, you know what, I want to go on probation in my home county, if you transfer the case to that other jurisdiction following whatever procedures you have, this would be the option you choose. And something that we've added recently is what we call client outcome. So this is going to be for clients who terminate unsuccessfully from the program. We want to know what happened to them after they terminate unsuccessfully. So you'll see if you select the termination as unsuccessful, this little pop-up will come up here. That's just a prompt to say, please fill out this item, which is a number of different things that we would expect to happen after an unsuccessful termination. So resentence to the Department of Corrections if they're resentenced to prison for an unsuccessful term, resentence to county jail, resentence other probation, or resentence other specialty court. So the resentence to other probation or specialty court would be kind of how you would account for those individuals who are transferred within your jurisdiction. And then we have the other option. If something that's not on the list happens, we have the text box down here to just give us a brief couple word explanation of what it was. When somebody does terminate, we have the termination date field, and that's very important for us to know because when we're actually going through the information, we use the termination dates to see how long individuals have been in the program, and to run some of the reports that we have. So when clients finish, we like to have that termination date in there. So the last field here on the main form is primary drug of choice. This came about, this is a recent addition because we've noticed at the state level that there seem to be very strong trends in drug use across the state, most notably heroin. So that's something that Adult Redeploy is very interested to keep track of, what the different substance abuse or use issues are in the different Adult Redeploy counties. So we have this fairly comprehensive list here. These are all just generic substances in most cases. You'll also see that we have, synthetic here for some of those new drugs that come out occasionally. If an individual doesn't have a substance use problem or doesn't use substances at all, we have the none indicated field, and that flags us that this person doesn't have a drug problem or a substance use issue. If there is something that comes up that's not on this list, there's an other specify button here. So this, again, use it and click it and you've got the text box to just quickly write in what the other drug is. I've had the question, well, what happens if somebody comes in and they always use multiple substances all the time, they never use one drug over the others? If that's going to be the case where they say, you know what, I always use marijuana and PCP at the same time, then my recommendation is to select other and then just type in down here and that way we can get an idea of what that multiple substance use is. So that's the main form. When you get to the point where you have multiple clients in here,
I have a question.
oh sure.
If a person has a primary drug, but they also do regularly use other drugs, do you want those listed in the other box?
I personally, as a researcher, I would say no. Most people are interested in the primary, so what's driving use, what's driving behavior. If it's a case like I explained where they're always or almost always using an array of substances at the same time, then I would think it would be appropriate. But I will leave that up to you guys to decide. So one of the driving factors with the database is trying to minimize the amount of work that the users have to put into it. So just selecting the primary drug of choice is a way we can kind of minimize that, because some people do use a wide variety of substances. So this is just a way for us to limit that extra work that goes on. But if you guys want to keep track of that, that's perfectly fine. That's up to you at the program level. So once you guys start getting multiple people in the program, the easiest way to navigate and find a specific case is to use the search function. So if you click that, you've got two text boxes that pop up. So you see first name like and last name like. This is what's called a wildcard search. So you can type in anything and it'll find a match in the first name field or the last name field for whatever text you put in. So if you know that you've got a guy, let's say named Peter, and you just want to put Pete, you can put that in and search for him, and it'll find all the records that meet that search criteria. You'll see down here at the bottom, it'll tell you how many individual cases meet that criteria. So this is just one person here. And if you want to work, if this is the person that you're looking for, then this is the case you'll want to stay on. If that's not what you're looking for, then you can hit end search to clear those search terms, and then go back here and say, oh, you know what, I was actually looking for this guy. Oh, there he is. Okay, we're good to go. So, like I said, that's a quick way to find a specific person that you want to enter information on or look at things really quickly. Yes?
What if there's multiple Peters?
Well, it'll show up down here. So right now there's only one of one record. So there's one record that meets that criteria.
Okay, I see.
Say you had 50 Peters and you typed in P-E-T-E-R, it would show one of 50 down
Got it.
there, and you can scroll through and say, oh, okay, that's the Peter I'm looking for.
Okay.
So it's, we do see people with common first names a lot, or common last names. So if you know first and last name, you can type those both in. So if you've got, Peter Jones, and you want to look for his case, but you've got 49 other Peters in there with different last names, you could type in Peter Jones, and it'll find his case.
So if you're updating a case, is that the quickest way to get?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through some of these sub-forms here real quick. I won't go too in-depth in most of them because they're fairly self-explanatory. There's no, I guess, suggested process for going through the forms. They're laid out how they're laid out. You don't have to go in any specific order. What I usually recommend is go based on the layout of a client's case file or where you're actually pulling the information from. So if in your case file you always have this demographic information and it's always followed by any type of non-compliance and then the LSIR score and then offending history, you can go in whatever order makes sense for you guys. I'm just going to go through across. So the alias form is very simple. This just allows us to get a handle on if there are any aliases for an individual. This is for when we pull criminal history records. Sometimes people come in with multiple names tied to the same fingerprints. This helps us narrow that down. If somebody doesn't have an alias or you don't have access to it, this is one of those pieces of information that's not really necessary. It's just nice to have it if it's available. And we're not looking for alias, date of birth, or any other identifiable information on that, just the first and last name. Offending history, this is where we keep track of a client's arrests and if there are any subsequent sentences attached to an arrest. So with this, the only things that we're looking for here are going to be, first off, violations of state law, so we're not looking for local ordinance or anything like that. And then we're only looking for the offense that got the person onto the current probation sentence, so whatever brought them into the act court, and any subsequent arrests after that. So we don't need you guys digging through their criminal histories for the last 20 years and entering hundreds of arrests in. It's just going to be the one that got them into the program, and if they pick up any new charges after that. The date of offense up here, from my experience, most of the time, the date of the actual offense isn't usually available 100% of the time, but the arrest date is. So I recommend that the arrest date be used in this field up here. The offense, you'll see it's the same categories that we have on the main screen. And then we have offense class as well. So I know with certain types of drug offenses or property offenses, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor depends on the amounts involved or the dollar amount. If there are any offenses like that and the class is not known at a specific point in time, we have the category just if it's a felony or if it's a misdemeanor. So those are good kind of placeholders so we know what we're looking at when we're analyzing this information. If there is sentence information available, we have all the check boxes over here. You'll see that we've got pretty much any of the more serious dispositions, prison, jail, probation, or conditional discharge. We've got check boxes, so if an individual receives a short jail stay plus their probation, you can enter information for both of those. And then whatever the sentence date was. So I know that in a lot of cases, disposition is a long time after the arrest. So the disposition or the sentence may not be available at the time you're entering information. That's fine. If it's not available, you obviously can't enter it. But what I do suggest, all of these records will stay here and they'll be available to come back to at a later date. So if, say, 6 months down the road, they do get a sentence attached to a specific arrest, you can come back in and enter it. You'll be able to see, okay, this was the arrest on 12/15, okay, and then 6 months later, here's the sentence for that. And you'll see on these subforms how they're kind of, they're different colors for different records. That's just a quick way to see that these here are two different records. The records, a new record will populate automatically, so you don't need to click anything to make a new record. So down here, you'll see that this is all blank. This is a new record waiting to be populated. So if this guy picked up a new offense tomorrow and it was being entered, there's nothing else for you to do but enter that information. And the last thing on here, real quick, there are two checkboxes underneath these records. This one right here, is this the current probation offense? That one is particularly important for us at Adult Redeploy and at the Criminal Justice Information Authority. That serves as a flag for us to know that this particular offense, this arrest, is what's starting their Adult Redeploy timeline. So a lot of the dates that we have on here, we're using that decision date or their ARI start date as the starting point for their Adult Redeploy timeline. So This checkbox here lets us know that their arrest history is starting at this timeline, and it'll let me know when I'm looking at it not to count this as a new arrest. So I see, okay, this is their current probation offense. I'm not going to count that as a new arrest when I'm doing my numbers. The next form is what we call conditions and requirements. So this is where we're keeping track of anything that an individual is required to do as part of their probation or as part of their participation in the ACT court. So we have things in here like more general probation conditions like drug testing, electronic monitoring, or anything like that. And we also have treatment requirements or treatment referrals in here. So this is how we track, or this is how we record those pieces of information. This is the first drop-down menu, and this is the type of requirement, condition, or treatment. You'll see it's a pretty big menu here. Not all of these options are used by the ACT court, so I've kind of narrowed it down just to the ones that were on the list that Katie sent me a while ago. So there shouldn't be many on here that you guys won't be using, but I'll show you later on how we can narrow these down if you find that there are items on the list that you never use, or if there are other items that aren't on the list that you may want to use. We'll show you how to go through and update that. But so that's the type of requirements. And we also have the source of that requirement. So you'll see there are a few different options in here. Starting at intake means that it's required as a part of their participation in the ACT court. So in most cases, starting at intake is what you'll choose. And that just lets us know that this particular requirement or this treatment referral is coming as a part of the ACT court. You'll see that there are some other options in here that you guys, given your referral process, probably won't be using. But there are things like if there's going to be a new requirement or condition added because of a rearrest, because of a technical violation, or because of some other reason, we have options to be able to track those different reasons as well. And then service mode, so inpatient or outpatient, that may not apply all the time. If it does, we have inpatient and outpatient. If it doesn't, you can either leave it as the default or select other. And then we have the service provider as well. So this again was narrowed, or this is customized from the list that was sent to me previously. So you'll see there's a giant number of different service providers in here. Not all of these will be accessible to you guys, only the ones that are on the list that was given to me previously. So we've started changing the way we capture this information a little bit. We have the referral date here. So we wanted to be able to keep track of when an individual is referred to a specific type of treatment or a specific condition, and then when they actually start it or if they actually start it. So the referral date is going to be the date that either task or probation says, you know what, you need to go to substance abuse treatment, here's your referral, call up this provider tomorrow and get yourself in treatment. That would be the date that individual is making the referral. And then if they do start, we've got the checkbox here for has a client started. Checked means yes, they've started. And then the actual start date up at the top. So generally, the referral date and the start date will be pretty close. In some cases, if an individual can't get a treatment bed or they're on a waiting list or something like that, it may be a little bit longer. But I'm expecting that there will be a referral date for pretty much everything and a start date for most things unless clients aren't following through with their referrals. So a couple more options on here. Is this required? Generally, you're going to be leaving this at yes, it's required as part of intake. So the required at intake option is kind of going to be your default, your go-to. That lets the program know that, okay, I'm going to keep track of this going forward. I'm going to be looking for some specific pieces of information on this requirement. The optional ones at the top here, those are things like if a client comes in and says, you know what, I want to take basket weaving classes, and he tells the probation officer or the task case manager, and they say, hey, that's great, good for you. I'm not really going to track that because that's something you're doing on your own. That's great. They would put that in as optional if you even wanted to keep track of it. Some of the other ones I think you guys may use are required due to technical violation or required due to rearrest. So again, if you have somebody that, say, has a positive drug test and you're going to file either some kind of violation or any other type of non-compliance form, and you say, okay, because of that positive drop, we're going to get you into drug treatment. Required due to technical violation would be the reason for this requirement. And we have a required amount as well. So if it's something that makes sense to have an amount, like community service with a number of hours, or fines and fees, or restitution with a specific dollar amount, this is where you would enter that amount that's required by the court or by probation. If it's something that doesn't quite make sense to have a number, or it may have a number and you just don't know what it would be, like a specific number of treatment sessions or something else like that, you can leave it blank as a 0, or you can guesstimate what it might be. So if they say, I'm going to residential treatment, and you think, okay, that's about, say 30 days, you could put a 30 in here, and it'll be able to keep track of that amount. And then one of the features that we recently added to this is just a quick status. So you'll see down here, is the sanction complete? This is just a quick way to see, okay, yes, this has been completed, and here was the date that it was completed. If it says no, that means the program thinks it's still active because there's not been a completion date for this specific thing quite yet. And then I'll show you in a minute how we can monitor the statuses of these different requirements. So in summary, this acts as kind of a